So this is 2.2.4, the fall of the classical empires, right? And we can talk about China. We'll talk about Gupta India. We're going to talk about Rome. And even make mention of Persia. These are our classical empires, right? And they're all going to fall. Empires don't last forever, right? And the classical period takes us to about this 600 year, right? Well, these don't all fall at the same time. It doesn't work out. These guys are around about 600. These guys are around about 200. Rome, round about 500. Persia, round about 600. So we're going to have different time periods that these civilizations will be facing their collapse. But through all of them, and really throughout all of human history, civilizations are going to collapse for largely the same reasons. All right? There's going to be external factors, and there's going to be internal. There's going to be internal factors and external factors. Things that happen inside that country that will lead to collapse, and things that are coming from outside. And more often than not, these things are interrelated. All right? So let's start with the internal factors that might contribute to a civilization being in decline. There's our friend the Lorax, right? Hopefully you will remember the Lorax wearing this toga and connect him with the Roman tunic, I guess. Connect him with the Roman world. And the Lorax, if you're familiar with the Dr. Seuss story, he speaks for the trees have no tongues. The Onceler went through and started chopping down all the truffula trees, right? Until he clear-cut the entire forest, and then there was only one seed left. We know this, right? This hits on the idea of deforestation being a major environmental problem that could lead to a civilizational collapse. Civilizations need wood. Wood gets chopped down. It can take many, 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 many years for those forests to regrow. And in most cases, until really the modern day, we didn't even consider regrowing forests. We just pretty much thought there would be more, we would just push further. But if you're Rome, if you're Italy, eventually you're running out of trees that you haven't chopped down. And as you press further north into Gaul and other regions of the Roman Empire, you're going to chop those trees down. Trees do a lot for our environment, and most of it, they're beautiful. You guys might talk about trees providing oxygen and absorbing carbon dioxide. That's all well and good. But in the immediate, trees provide a vital importance when it comes to water management. When it rains, if there were no trees, and those trees having roots, if there were no trees, that rainwater would just accumulate. It would have nowhere to go. It would have nowhere to go. And then we would have flooding. Or we would have rivers overcresting their banks. And we would then experience soil erosion. All right? When you experience flooding, you experience soil erosion. Soil being here and now being taken away from us. And when you have soil erosion, you could have the increase of infertile or even desert lands. This is called desertification. So clear-cutting trees, cutting down trees, can result in the growth of deserts. Desertification, expanding of deserts. Or if not actually expanding deserts, just decreasing the amount of fertile soil that we would be able to grow food on. And we could probably see why that could be a problem for a civilization that needs to produce food, right? That's an internal problem we might be dealing with, an environmental problem. You also might, so let's throw under internal, environment. You might have weak leaders. Or even corrupt leaders. Corruption. Leaders that are out for their own personal benefit rather than for the good of the state. We talked about in China with that dynastic cycle, right? New guy comes in, he's inspired to do good stuff, but eventually he dies. Maybe his kid is a nice guy too, but maybe his grandson is a real piece of work. And his grandson doesn't look out for the best interest of the state. And maybe his grandson is influenced by corrupt bureaucrats who, rather than carrying out the best will of the emperor for the state, might actually just try to line their own pockets. So weak leadership could cause civilization's issues. All right? That's another internal issue that we might be dealing with. You may have social unrest. Social unrest. Social unrest. Protests. Riots. Revolutions. In China during the 2nd century BCE, a Taoist sect known as the Yellow Turbans. These are Taoists that just wore yellow turbans on their head. They revolted against the Han government. And this became a massive revolutionary movement that the Han government needed to turn and attempt to put down. Yes? Really, they could be associated with any empire in decline. Yes, I'm giving you a couple of specific examples, like the Yellow Turban Revolt in China. Remember, we talked about the Jewish diaspora, right? That was a response to social unrest. And the Romans send an army to squash that diaspora. Now, the Roman Empire will live long after that. That was a relatively small protest movement by a small group, but it's still an issue for that society to deal with. Another internal issue is disease or plague. Diseases. If your society suffers from epidemic diseases that destroy populations, you can imagine that a civilization would have a hard time. Both Han China and Rome will suffer epidemic outbreaks of measles and smallpox that will be devastating to their populations. Both China and Rome will suffer from disastrous disease epidemics. So these are a collective of internal problems that could bring an empire to an end. Now what happens is usually when you have these things going on, when you have environmental problems that might impact your food production, when you have weak or corrupt leadership, maybe that leads to social unrest. When you have social unrest, you've got to use your army to try to put down these protests. So you might be taking soldiers that could be on the outskirts of your empire keeping you safe, and now they have to come inside to put down riots. You might have diseases that cut through the soldier population, right? And now you're less able to protect yourself on your borders. Here's where we come to external problems. Invasions. All of these empires, really the invasion is what comes at the end. The empire rots from inside through diseases, through social unrest, through corruption of their leaders. And then it is now exposed to outside invasions that could topple it. If the leaders were good, if the society was in harmony, if there weren't epidemic diseases, they could protect the borders very easily. But when we start to see those factors arise, we will see all of these civilizations fall. So really, the internal problems contribute to the external problems. All right? All three of these classical civilizations, or four even, but let's talk about Han China, Gupta India, and the Roman Empire. All three of them will experience outside invasions that ultimately bring their empires to a fall. All of them are connected to a group of people hailing from Central Asia called the Huns. They all are going to be impacted by the Huns. Now the Huns are not any one ethnic group from East Asia all the way to Europe. The Huns. The reality is there's different groups of Huns from east to west. But all of them will contribute to bringing down these classical civilizations. Let's start with the Roman issue. The Huns from out here the Huns from out here in Asia, led by a guy named Attila, you might ever hear of Attila the Hun, might be a name you're familiar with, will start to push into Europe. And as they push into Europe, they will push into people that live in Northern Europe called the Germanic tribes. They're German, original German people. The Germanic tribes. You saw in your reading maybe a word, the Ostrogoths, or the Visigoths, or the Vandals. Various different Germanic tribes living in Northern Europe. So the Huns are pushing them. And as they are pushed, they will begin to push back into Rome. Now, if the Roman Empire was stronger, if they weren't dealing with diseases, if they had better leaders, if they weren't spread so thin around a massive empire, the Romans would have been able to keep those Germanic tribes at bay. But they weren't that strong anymore. So the Germanic tribes will ultimately be able to push down into Rome. And by the year 476, they actually burn the city of Rome to the ground. In 476, Rome will burn. In 476, Rome burns. So outside invasion, yes ma'am. BC. CE of the Common Era. 476 of the Common Era. My bad. So Rome burns, yes.
So it's burned by the Huns?
It's burned by the Germanic tribes. It's burned by the Goths, Goths. These were a bunch of Germanic people. They were all black. They put a lot of white makeup on their face. No, I'm kidding. Those are modern Goths. Yeah, these are Germanic Goths. So they got. Can you stand up for me for a second? And can I get you, Miss Sar? I'm a Hun. I'm a Hun. You are Rome. Stand here. Stand in line. I'm a Hun. Stand shoulder to shoulder. I'm a Hun. She's a Germanic tribe. She is Rome. All right? If I am going to be the Huns expanding my reach, now I'm entering into your territory. And as I enter into your territory, you're pushed into Rome. Got it? So it's the Huns pushing the Germanic tribes into the Roman Empire. Eventually Rome burns. But we already mentioned last week, right? We already mentioned last week, Rome does not have just one capital anymore, right? Rome still has a Constantinople capital. So for our purposes, Rome falls. The Roman Empire falls. But a little secret, the Roman Empire will actually live on for another 1,000 years, just based on the city of Constantinople. They'll still call themselves Romans. Historians will call them the Byzantine Empire. We'll get there later. Don't worry about it now. But the other capital, the eastern capital of Rome, will live on. Yes, ma'am. Burn Rome. Burn the city of Rome. They burn the city of Rome. So basically they conquer the western part of the Roman Empire. The eastern part will live on. Huns in China. Huns in China will do much the same. Where's my China? There we go. Huns in China will do much the same. See this word up here? The Xiongnu. 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 Those are Huns to the north of Han China. And with the weakness in the Han Chinese dynasty, they will be able to breach the Great Wall of China and invade and ultimately bring an end to the Han dynasty. Yes?
Were the Huns all in contact?
No. These are just people of common ethnic background, but no connection whatsoever. All right? So they will bring an end to the Han dynasty. You guys are watchers of Mulan. The bad guys in Mulan were the Han. They called them the Huns. For AP World History, though, let's call them the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu people. All right? Because we're a little advanced. The Gupta dynasty will suffer a similar fate. Yes, ma'am. 221 BC, or CE, pardon me. They lasted about 200 to 200. Yes. They were the Huns that invaded China. The Gupta dynasty, they also will fall because of a northern invasion, or contributed by a northern invasion. The group of Huns that will move into northern China are known as the White Huns. It is what it is. So anyway, if you memorize all these names, awesome. If you don't, and all you do going forward is you know that all of these classical dynasties ultimately meet their end because northern invasions bring them down, then you're good to go. Yeah.
So when did the Persian Empire?
Around about the late 500s. Late 500s. The Persians are going to meet a little bit of a different fate. The Persians will ultimately get kind of enveloped in the Muslim world in the next period once the Islamic world is born and starts to expand. That'll be overtaking the Persian empires. So we're not going to worry about them too much right now. All right? Cool.